You are live. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to Economic Growth and Development on July 20th. Has everybody had a chance to look over the minutes of our last meeting?
Would we?
Yes?
Yes.
Craig, is that a motion to approve?
No, that was the answer to your first question.
How about a motion?
I move to accept meetings of prior meeting.
Thank
I'll
you.
second the motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Frazier. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Before we get into our department reports, I've asked Dan Kelleher from the Adirondack Park Agency to join us today and speak for a few minutes on the services that the Park Agency provides for municipalities. We hear a lot about the regulatory end of the Adirondack Park Agency and not a lot about the Economic Affairs Department. So Dan, are you with us?
I am here.
Welcome.
Thank you. I did put together a presentation, but it's not. I'm not getting the ability to share my screen. I don't know if. What's that?
Try now.
There we go. All right. Can just get into the presentation mode here. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Terrific. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for having me. I didn't know how long to speak. I can go as quick or as short as you'd like. But I see some new faces here and I see some old friends. So by way of introduction, my name is Dan Kelleher. I'm the economic advisor to the Adirondack Park Agency, where I manage the economic services unit. And in that role, we have three primary responsibilities. Firstly, the agency is statutorily required to take into account the economic benefits of a project if we need to weigh them against significant environmental concerns. And so we do that economic impact analysis. The second thing I do is I work with project developers to try to get them through APA permitting processes as quickly as possible. And the third part of my job, which is my favorite and the reason why I'm here today, is I get to go out and work with communities and economic developers and private businesses to help them achieve their economic development and quality of life goals. My goal with this presentation today is threefold. One is to introduce the services we offer to municipalities. Two, highlight some success stories in the park. And then three, hear from you guys and get some feedback about what we can be doing to serve the folks in Warren County better. So if there's one takeaway related to the services we offer to local governments, it's that we can be very flexible. And if you have a need or something that isn't on the list of services we provide or have provided, we're happy to try to accommodate that and build programming around what you're looking for. And some of the areas where we've worked with local governments include economic and demographic data analysis, industry, retention and recruitment, community planning, project siting and permitting, and project feasibility analysis. And then I'll just go through, I have a list of some projects and programs that we've offered recently to show you, some of our capabilities. One of our more thorough and in-depth programs is our Hamlet Economic Planning and Assistance program. And this is where we actually come into a local community and work with a stakeholder work group to develop an economic development plan for your Hamlet Center. And we work with a local stakeholder work group and go through a full public participation process to develop that plan. We'll actually write the plan for the work group, and then we'll stick around and try to help you implement that as well. And this program is completely free to local governments. So, every taxpayer in New York is helping pay for this. And, we've gone through this in the town and village of Lake George. We worked with the village of Northville, the town of Northampton. And again, we're happy to provide this free of charge to any one of the 101 towns and villages in the Adirondack Park. We don't necessarily have to go through a full process all the time. We've done a lot of smaller projects that kind of feed as the bedrock for those plans. In the town of Johnsburg, Andrea, we worked with you guys on developing a business recruitment marketing plan, looking at how do we position the town of Johnsburg to attract new private investment in businesses. And getting even more into the weeds, we've developed market analyses for different sectors for towns across the park. I think on the right-hand side, that's a page taken from a grocery store market analysis that we performed for the town of Indian Lake, who lost their grocery store about 12 years ago. And so we're happy to try to get into the weeds, get into the data, and try to develop strategies to attract new businesses and new services. This program, it's our Envision Adirondacks program, where we'll actually work with you to develop 3D renderings of what your community could look like under different planning and zoning scenarios. We've undertaken this work again in the town of Johnsburg. We worked on a project in Lake Placid, and we worked on a project in Saranac Lake. This program does take a little lead time, as we don't have the internal expertise to do the 3D rendering, so we have to go out and hire college interns who have that skill set. But again, this is another free of charge. All of our programs are free of charge and available to all 101 towns and villages in the park. We do get involved in comprehensive planning and zoning. We worked with the town of Crown Point on their comprehensive plan. We're currently working with the town of North Elba and Village of Lake Placid on their zoning update. And then many of you may know Robin Burgess and Caitlin Knight, who administer our local planning services activities, and they're happy to provide zoning consultations and planning consultations to all 101 towns and villages. And they also administer our agency approved local land use program that 18 communities in the park have taken advantage of. In those local land use programs, what they do is they shift some agency jurisdiction over to the towns. And that's something that some jurisdictions here in Warren County have taken part of, including Johnsburg, Chester, Bolton, and in Lake George. We serve on a lot of committees at the local level as well. Local waterfront revitalization plans are something that's administered through the New York State Department of State. Most of the communities in the Adirondack Park are available to apply for and receive LWRP grants. And those grants are looking at how do we maximize the use of your waterfront to achieve your community development and economic development goals. And so we sit on a variety of those committees, Scroon Lake, Tupper Lake, Northville. So we're happy to not necessarily lead a project, but to also to serve as a stakeholder and an advisor on your projects. Now we get involved in business recruitment. This is actually the front page of a hospitality recruitment deck that we put together for the town of Johnsburg, really focused on the hamlet of North Creek and trying to bring hotels into the area to capitalize on Gore Mountain and some of the summer recreation amenities in the town. So we're happy to take the leadership role in trying to bring in new business and attract new investment. And then we work in partnership with a lot of different organizations. This is just an example where we partnered with ANCA's Center for Businesses in Transition, where they're seeking to find new owners for the 10,000 to 15,000 business owners and businesses that where the owner is seeking to transition out of their business. And so if we're not able to connect those existing businesses with new buyers and new owners, or transition them to employee ownership, we could have some significant business loss. And so this is an initiative trying to solve that challenge. So that's an overview of the services we provide and how flexible we can be. And again, that's the key takeaway. But one of the things I like to do when I go out and meet with communities or have the opportunity to speak with different counties, I like to highlight different success stories in the region. I think putting our best foot forward and talking about successes is key to economic development. And so I like to include some success stories as well. Over the last 10 years, one of the big pushes across the region was to increase hospitality development. We can't maximize tourism spending if people don't have a place to rest their head at night and extend their stay. And so from small communities like Northville and Tupper Lake to Old Forge to Saranac Lake, we've seen significant and diverse types of new hospitality development, ranging from several $100,000 rehabs of cabin colonies, and those are two projects outside of Tupper Lake, all the way to a $36 million investment to rehab the historic Hotel Saranac in downtown Saranac Lake. We're also seeing some success on an issue that's been pressing in the Adirondacks for a long time, and that's housing diversity and housing affordability. A developer recently bought the Ovalwood Dish factory in Tupper Lake to turn that into a mix of a market rate and affordable housing. The APA just approved a 70-unit project in downtown Saranac Lake that sets aside housing for both low income, moderate income, and artist housing. And then, this investment's even occurring in smaller communities, right? In that project in the upper right-hand corner, that's an 8-unit senior affordable housing project that was just completed in the village of Northville. And that was a priority project of the community since about 2014. So it's terrific to see that project coming to fruition. And so, we're seeing a lot of momentum behind this area. And one of my personal crusades is to try to expand our industries where the median salary is higher than tourism. In our region, about 42% of workers are employed in an occupation where the median salary is less than $30,000 annually. And that includes tips. And that compares to about 28% statewide. So we have a high proportion of folks employed in low wage employment. And so if we can focus on bringing in exporting industries, businesses that make things in the Adirondacks and then ship them out there, outside the blue line, we can increase the wages for our workers. And these are all the logos of different businesses inside the park that are successful, that are manufacturing or service-based, that pay a higher salary than the median income, right? And even here in Warren County, we have some awesome success stories, right? From Hackercraft to Creative Stage Lighting to Adirondack Brewery, where these are businesses that make a product here and they ship it out of the blue line and they pay higher wages. And then finally, we like to talk about, cellular infrastructure, and it doesn't always feel like a success story. But at the agency, we do like to highlight our work in this area. We've approved 137 new towers across the park since 1973, with a majority of those towers being approved in the last 10 years. So we're getting a significant momentum. Overall, we've issued 446 permits and permit amendments, not just for those towers, but for continued improvements to those towers, including antenna upgrades and antenna add-ons. A tower is only as good as its cone of service, and so as you upgrade those antennas, the radius of service actually improves as well. I just want to take you through what that development looked like over the last 40 years. These are the towers that were approved from 1976 to 1986. These are the towers that were approved from 1987 to 1997. These are the towers that were approved from 1998 to 2008. And then you can see a big jump right between 2008 to 2009 to 2019, right? And that's where we've really seen the new investment come in and build out our cellular infrastructure. At the agency, we're readily apparent that there remain gaps. I've owned a private business in the park, and just the gap between my house and my office, where I usually do my phone calls, has been the biggest nuisance was one of the biggest nuisances in my life. And so we're readily aware of the challenges that still remain, and we do work proactively with our cell carriers and have annual meetings to look at what their priorities are for the next 12 months and try to build up a permitting pipeline so that we can get their projects through our process as expeditiously as possible. And with that, this is my second to last slide. I mentioned I owned a private tech company that we started in Lake Placid. And these are all the different organizations that helped us get from idea to a 12-person business. And the main takeaway is it takes a region to help build a business. And so if we want to build more Creative Stage Lightings or Hackercrafts or Will Industries here in the Adirondacks, we all have to work together to try to grow these businesses. And with that, again, I would love to hear from you about how we can service you better. And thank you for your time. And I'm happy to take any questions or receive any feedback. Thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for that great presentation. That was really, really informative. Are there any questions for Dan while we've got him here? Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman Hogan. I will attest to the value that Dan Kelleher and his office at the APA can provide a community. We have taken advantage of it. Dan has assisted us with the Town of Chester Economic Development Initiative years ago. And the slate that he just laid out for us with the other opportunities are a great resource for us to be able to take advantage of. And I thank you, Commissioner Hogan, Chairwoman Hogan, for bringing this before us today so that it does get known what the APA does have and their bench to be able to help communities with their economic development.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions for Dan?
And one more, Dan, tomorrow is the Common Ground Alliance. Are you going to be sitting in on the housing one or the economic development one?
Yeah, well, one, thank you for the kind words, Supervisor Leggett. And I'll be sitting in on the housing panel, and they have me switching between the two panels to give some data and insights into the overall housing challenges that we face in the region.
Sorry to miss you on ours.
Sorry, me too.
Thanks again, Dan, for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much.
And Supervisor Leggett, thank you for getting in another shameless plug for the Common Ground Alliance. It's tomorrow, everybody. It's really worth your time. All right, moving on with our agenda. We are going to move into departments. Let's start with planning.
All right, everybody's got a copy of the agenda. It's very light today, which is good, since we're right on time as usual. The first is a resolution request. It's pretty self-explanatory in your packet. We have an agreement with the Regional Planning Board. Things got delayed with COVID. Sarah was busy with the COVID, with the COVID website, and so was Regional Planning Board with the loan programs that they had to develop. So we'd like to extend that for a year with the concurrence of the Regional Planning Board. Original agreement was 31.2. We've expensed 5,200 of that. So we will try to get back on track and finish off the work program this year. So I'd ask the committee's consideration to extend that agreement with the Regional Planning Board.
Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Supervisor Garrity,
I'll second it.
Supervisor Leggett on the second. Thank you. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, the next item is the Lake George Septic Replacement Program. Ethan should be on here from the office to give a brief update.
Don't see him.
Don't see him. Okay. Well, as of this morning, we had 54 applications for the project program. We have not expensed any money yet. We're still collecting the information, and we will move forward probably the end of next week because we are neck deep in the CFA process right now, which actually is a segue to the next next agenda item.
Wayne, before you move on, I think Supervisor Dickinson had a question.
Oh, 54. Well, they're within 250 feet of the shoreline. I don't have a community representation on that yet. Sarah and Amanda are putting them into the GIS so we can see the geographic distribution of where they are in relation to tributaries and the shoreline. So,
We have that for next meeting, maybe?
sure.
Thank you. Supervisor Stroud?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm just also wondering too, is there like, because we're gonna have to triage, is there criteria and priorities for some of these properties? For example, the town of Lake George put together a great risk assessment for properties along Lake George in terms of their septic situation. They viewed things such as terrain, the type of soils, how old's the system, what other confining natures of the system that they currently have needs to go in the assessment. And then those areas that need the strongest look got like a red, and they got mapped out and so forth. So I'm just thinking that it might behoove us to look at the town of Lake George's risk assessment and use that as one of the components that we look at in assessing who gets what. So, and have we talked to the state about a recurring amount? For example, we're easily going to use the 340,000 we're allocated this year. Are they looking at something for your future years? So I guess there's two questions. One is a risk assessment. The second is what's the future look like for this program?
Part of the reason we're putting the applications into the GIS is to do that analysis of proximity to tributaries, proximity to known hotspots, that type of review. As far as additional funding, I think we have not had that discussion. It may have started this morning. I don't know. There was Don Lehman had some emails back and forth with somebody about the need, and I think there was some feelers being made there. Right now, I have not heard of any additional funding being provided to that program. And I also think it would be representative of we can do a minimum of 34 homes, depending on the cost of the system. We can't exceed half the replacement cost. So if not everybody does a $20,000 system and uses $10,000, we will probably do more than 34 units. And if there's 54 that we currently have, and we do most of those or a good number of those, is there a demand or a need for additional that we can prove statistically to the state? So those are all things that we're going to be looking at. But right now, there's not been any indication from the state that there's additional funding in that line item. So.
All right, thank you, Wayne.
Supervisor Dickinson. Thank you.
So, Wayne, first off, I'd like to thank John for bringing up Lake George's efforts. We have a tremendously detailed overlay, and we'd be happy to assist with any of those systems that you have that are in Lake George. Which brings me to my point here is, what is your involvement with the town in these septic systems?
I'm going to be very honest about that. I've left that up to Ethan, and I know he's talked to Dan. Where they stand with that, I'm not sure.
Dan?
Ethan's.
I just showed up. Sorry, I didn't get the meeting link till a little bit later. But to back up to where Wayne left off, yeah, we received over 50 some odd applications. I've fielded calls from what feels like 100 people. And as Wayne said, we're putting all this information into a database. We had a 4-page application. So we want to make a very objective evaluation of this money, because there are limited funds. So once we have the opportunity to look at the entire body of need that we have from all these applicants, then we can start to send out letters of award, notice to proceed, or denial, or solicit more information. We do hope to make the case to the state that there should be more rounds of funding for the septic replacement program. We do have high needs. There's certainly going to be a lot more people looking for funding to replace septic than money will be available. That's just the reality of it.
If I may, Ethan, we've done all this in Lake George. We've done it all. That's what our sewer initiative is. My concern is 90% of the systems that we get for rehab require a variance. And we have very strict requirements in the town of Lake George about our local board of health, which is a consolidated board of health with a village in the town. We have very strict demands on what they can do for replacing these septic systems in these critical areas. So I guess my question is, what I asked Wayne earlier is, what is your intention to interface with these towns?
We do not have any intention of superseding, the home rule authority of any of our municipalities. Part of the reimbursement process would be that, hey, you have to have all your local approvals in order to be eligible for reimbursement. So this county is not going to be funding projects that don't have local approvals, right? So we're not going to say, all right, here's grant money for a septic system that's clearly not accepted by the municipal.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that, Ethan, and I hope that they contact us early rather than later. Thank you.
Anyone else? Wayne, did you have more?
Yes, the last thing I just want to give a brief update on the status of the funding applications that we're doing. They're in your booklet, your agenda packet. There are two in there, or actually there's one that's not part of this, but we're closing it out to hopefully today. The total applications are for about 1.6 million for a number of different projects, some county, some local municipalities. The big one that's not on there is the CARES Act funding for Countryside for the MERV 13 filtration requirements. That application should be, I'm just waiting for the chairwoman to sign some of the attachments that go in. And that application is going to be for $810,932. So talking with Kevin Hajos and Ed up at DPW and with Nina, with the previous funding that we were awarded and with the county's match coming in, it's roughly a 2.5 million investment into rehabbing Countryside. So that is a significant project that has a 14-month window of opportunity there. So we really need to move that. Kevin and Ed are aware of that. They think it's ambitious but doable. So I know there was discussion with resolution at the last board meeting regarding the $1 million match. And I would just hope that that doesn't get lost in the paperwork shuffle, because we have to show the state that that money is available before they will release the funds to us. So we can do a lot before the funds are released, but when it comes time to write a check, that needs to be there. So
Understood. I believe we have nearly universal support for that project, and I'm sure Supervisor McGowan will join me as chair of facilities in thanking you for all of your efforts to pull that together, because this is really important.
it's actually a very good project. And I've been saying for 8 years now that I'm going to retire, but this is one I want to see to its end. So we'll see how long I last.
I told somebody earlier we were going to have a little bit of feel good in this meeting, and there it is. Thank you.
And that's really all I've got.
Does anybody have any questions for Wayne? Thank you, and thank you for your patience. Liza is next on the agenda, workforce and training. You still with us?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Hogan. Good afternoon, everyone. I have for you just one resolution request today to approve the annual budget of the Workforce Development Board for our Tri-County area. And I'm happy to explain in more details once it's on the floor.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to bring that to the floor? Supervisor Frazier? Yes. Supervisor Leggett with the second. Go ahead, Liza.
Sure. So you will see in your packet, we're increasing, our request is to increase the Workforce Development Board budget by about 51%. Through extensive research, we have found that our Workforce Development Board budget has not been competitive or aligned with the rest of the 32 Workforce Development Boards in the state. But we also know that as we are recovering from the pandemic, that this Workforce Development Board, with a new leader in the last year, we're going to continue to need a more active and effective board, right? And so that is the rationale for the increase in budget. WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, our grant requires that the 3 counties from that budget fund the Workforce Development Board. And we did receive an increase in our WIOA budget for this program year 2021, which started July 1st. So in my budget, you'll see next month I have an additional $75,000 compared to last year. So we don't have any concerns with funding them more adequately. But I'm happy to answer any questions, and you have the itemized budget for the board in front of you.
Has everyone had a chance to review those documents? Yes. Any questions? Supervisor Leggett?
So on this board budget, this is, then Warren County is responsible for contributing a portion of this, correct?
From my budget, from the WIOA dollars, the federal grant dollars.
So out of this $94,000 increase, what would be the increase to Warren County directly?
Sure. So I would be paying out of this department $39,000 more than last year to fund the Workforce Development Board. And Saratoga County is our fiscal agent, so they will be taking on the benefits for the executive director effective January 1st. And Saratoga County has passed this budget already too.
And where's Washington County on this?
They will be voting next month. But in our previous Workforce Development Board meeting, everybody that was present was in agreement that the board budget needed to increase for a variety of reasons.
Any further questions? Supervisor Leggett? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just one more. I'm kind of new to the Workforce Development Board budgets here. So this budget has been put forward by your board, the Workforce Development Board.
Correct, and our fiscal agent, Saratoga County. The federal grant requires that we have the board and that our funds for each of the 3 counties contribute to the board operations budget. So, and Supervisor Leggett, to be more specific about what the contribution from my department would be is about $68,000, which is again about $39,000 more than last year.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? I'll call it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Liza. I can't think of a more important time to expand the services.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Do you have anything else?
I do not today.
Well done. Although we do always enjoy hearing from you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for hanging in there.
Sure. Thank you.
Next and not on the agenda, but always on the agenda is Jim Siplon. Wondering if I was going to get one of those.
I left your message.
I almost came over. to see.
All right.
Give
So,
me just a moment, please.
no worries. I've got to distribute some papers here. I'm giving you two copies. One you can keep, and one has maps that I have to collect at the end of the meeting because of the proprietary nature of the carrier data that is listed there. But I want you people to follow along.
In case you're watching and you can't hear, Jim is handing out paperwork.
Yeah. So while we're getting ready with the charts, can everyone hear me? I want to quickly tell you what we're going to cover today, and I have to be honest with you. Your speedy meeting may
may hit a speed bump here. I want to give you some updates to broadband. On Friday, it was clear to me that there's some confusion here, and I want to try to clarify as much of that as we can within the time that we have allotted. There's also a eminent grant application that we're in the midst of that I want to try to make sure that you have all the detail that I can provide to you today around. Also, we're involved in some fairly novel housing work. We formed a housing work group, and I want to make sure that we're keeping you apprised of what's happening in that work group, why it's been formed, and where it's going. And then the last thing I want to mention to you is just to provide you an update on business activity, but there are some notable things that are occurring in the business activity arena. And then I guess I should have said that isn't actually the last thing. Important to know that tomorrow marks the date at which we lost Ed. And a year ago at this point, I think we were all trying to figure out how we were going to proceed going forward. I hope that we are making steadfast progress on that. But I also think it's important that we get back to the job of recognizing the legacy of Ed. And so I have an update to you on some of the activities that we're trying to lead from the EDC, maybe not so coincidentally, right here at this anniversary point. You tell me if you're ready. All right, so we'll come back to that. I'd like to get into broadband now. So as I mentioned to you, go ahead and just click through to the first map, I think. We did that. All right, there you go. As many of you know, maybe you remember, we initiated a study a year ago. My very first day on the job, I came and met with a number of you. Kevin Garrity was there. I remember Ryan, you were there. There were a number of others that I met with when I'd taken the role as the interim leader at the EDC. And one of the very first priorities that was shared was providing more resource to the management of broadband. There was a tremendous amount of activity that had been initiated, but there was a desire to both facilitate the problem solving around the existing work that was going on and to identify what was going to remain and what needed to be addressed going forward. So I took at face value that input and we immediately went to work. The EDC then approved an update to our maps, which ECC has done. And these two charts, your two maps that you see, are part of the draft report which has been submitted to me. We've had it for a little more than a week. And the reason that I haven't released it to you yet is because there's a tremendous amount of activity that has to be cross-referenced with the carriers to ensure that it's current. And we're also working with each one of you in your particular area to make sure that the data that is reflected there is current and right. We believe very strongly that this report, which is going to be made available not only to you, but to the public, needs to be up to date. And it's hard to stay up to date on broadband, as you'll see. These two charts show you some of the results that came out of the survey. This part is unequivocal. ECC did this work, and on those two charts, you'll see the type of broadband that users identified that they have available to them by area of the county. So you'll see, for instance, a predominance of cable and to some degree fiber in areas like Glens Falls and Queensbury. And then you'll see other types like DSL, satellite, or other in the greater county. You'll also see a growing preponderance of fiber to the home in places that you would not normally see it. Without the work that's been going on for the last several years, that fiber would naturally move from the city center out to the county. But that's not how it's working here. The predominance of fiber to the home is actually in the farthest reaches of the county. Now, there is a disconnect in this data that I'm showing you. Because if you look, for instance, at the upper corner near Johnsburg and North Creek, the upper northwest corner of the map on the left, you'll see a lot of blue dots. That represents significant fiber investment that has been put into that area. However, if you look at the map on the right, it asks people the question, are you able to access the internet that you need? Now, there are red dots all over that chart. That does not surprise me. What surprises me in places where we have put state-of-the-art fiber to have so many people answering that they're not able to access the internet that they need. More work has to be done here to discern how that answer is materializing. It could be at least one of three things. One, that they do not know that the fiber is available to them. Two, that they cannot afford it. Or three, that they live in a place where the connection to that fiber may be disproportionately expensive and an obstacle to them being able to access it. I don't have the answers to those questions. We got to do a lot more work to get at this. But it is also important to understand that throughout the county, even though we have invested significant effort in broadband over the last 5 or 10 years, there is still a lot of people that say they do not have access to the broadband that they need. Would you mind clicking through to the next chart for me? So this gets into some of the deep specifics. Without naming carriers, you can see different types of broadband and the routes that broadband takes in our county. The dominant carriers are carriers like Spectrum that have provided coaxial cable and oftentimes cable TV service at the same time as they're providing internet service. And that emanates from the population centers, typically in the south and around the lake. You'll see that listed there in terms of the type. But there's also new fiber, as I said, that's coming down from the north, primarily from carriers like Slick. This is important to understand because if you look at this map in terms of the number of technologies that are available in our county and where it is, and you compared that to our neighbors, you would be shocked at how much more dense we have than neighbors directly neighboring us, including Saratoga County, which has significant gaps in the rural areas of north and western Saratoga County. Would you mind clicking through one more? This by itself is what Slick has done in the last 18 months. You've heard from Kevin Lynch, and I think we're going to find probably no more passionate advocate for the expansion of broadband in the North Country than Kevin Lynch and Slick. But that's a significant amount of fiber that has been laid in the last 18 months. In fact, I think it's happened at a clip that is so rapid that it's hard for people to keep up. I do, though, get phone calls from people every week, basically telling me that their lives have been changed and wanting to know how that they can say thank you to Slick. Places like Thurman in particular, I think maybe because we spent so much time identifying the need there earlier in the year. But that build out of Slick is perhaps the most dense fiber to the home build out that has occurred north of Albany in the state. This is a good development for us. Still got some work to do though. I want to show you the next chart because I think it may answer some of the questions that are specific to some of your communities. Kevin Garrity, I know we, for instance, were trying to touch base with you to make sure that you knew not only what had been put in, but the green dots are homes in the Warrensburg, Chester, up. Some of this moves towards Stony Creek, but I don't think it quite gets into your area, Frank, but it does go deep into your area, Andrea. And all those green dots are addresses that have been turned up on Slick's fiber in the last 6 months. The yellow dots are fiber that has been built out, but it has not been turned up yet because of some externality. For instance, those two areas closest to Warrensburg that you see that almost looks like a little bent staple, that is sitting. Those are a number of homes, almost 100 homes that are sitting waiting for Verizon, which is not going to surprise any of you. I know, Frank, you're struggling with something similar with them. But we're trying to attempt with Slick to exert all the pressure we can on Verizon for them to essentially grant Slick the access to the facilities they need in order to turn that up. Yeah. There are other areas that you'll see where there's yellow dots. Sometimes that has to do with a carrier like Verizon. Sometimes it has to do with a carrier like Frontier. Sometimes it has to do with the state. The state sometimes holds easements that prohibit or inhibit the ability to turn this up. I'm pretty confident, though, we're involved in almost every one of these issues, and I'm pretty confident that they're moving. Every single one of them is presenting progress, and I am hopeful that by, say, the September timeframe, the vast majority of these yellow dots will turn into green dots. Every one of those green dots that you see there was basically in this condition less than a year ago. I know, for instance, we could not have made all of this happen without the support of the county in the easement work we did to grant Slick access to the location where they put the switch near Thurman. That's the kind of work that has gone on quietly, maybe too quietly. And so I wanted to make sure that we are updating you, both not only in this session, but our office will reach out to every single one of you if we haven't already, to walk you through these maps, to make sure you fully understand what's happening in your community, and to get the input from you about where you feel like you are still either unserved or underserved. But it's really important to understand that we now have, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 addresses in Warren County that are not addressed by what would be considered a minimal broadband standard. 600 addresses is not a significant amount. Still, we've got to address them, but it is much less than we expected or thought we had a year ago. Would you mind clicking through one more? So with that scenario, we've looked at the data that ECC has given to us and said, well, what should we be doing next? Part of the fabric of broadband, at least as it was previously defined, was Hughes satellite network. Whenever there was not a viable way to bring broadband to a significantly far-flung area, the catch-all was Hughes satellite network. I'm sure many of you have residents that are on it and frustrated by it. What we went to ECC and said, just show us all the HughesNet areas, because by the new standard of the grants that are flowing now, it does not meet the broadband standard. So those green areas that you see there are all HughesNet areas that have been theoretically counted as broadband before, but that don't really represent a true broadband solution. And we said to ECC, let's prioritize those areas to identify how we could solve that problem. If you click to the next chart, it will start to give you a sense of how we did that. We then looked at the population density in each one of those areas, because to a carrier, it's very hard to convince them to go do this work if they're not some kind of density of addresses in that block. You see that Lake Luzerne area, which is that red block. That is the most dense, attractive commercially area for build out, where their HughesNet was the predominant solution. So you'll see later in my presentation, that is the first priority of the grant that we are about to make application for. And then it varies from there through the yellow all the way down to the blue. When we get into the blue, we're getting into single digit densities per square mile. That's going to be very difficult to convince a carrier to do without significant subsidy, not only in terms of the cost to build out the network, but the cost to support the network. And this is something we're going to have to address collectively together, whether or not we're literally going to be able to get to every far-flung home in Warren County. But if we just address the ones where there's clear population density reasons to do, we can address more than 75% of the homes that are currently utilizing Hughes satellite network. If you click through to the next chart, we'll start to walk you through that process. These are the 5 areas where we believe more than 450 of the 600 addresses that are on HughesNet and therefore unserved by the current standard, we're suggesting be included in the next grant application. The first is in Lake Luzerne, which is the area between the lake and backing up towards the West Mountain range. So it kind of is in that corridor that you would go down on Corinth Road and then break towards Lake Luzerne. The second of these, I got to go look at my notes so I make sure I tell you the right order. The second of these is in Johnsburg, and it's near Baker's Mill. This is an area that is available to develop and is accessible by Slick and Frontier. This would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 40 homes. The third area is Chestertown, near the south end of Friends Lake. There's somewhere between 25 and 30 homes. We walked Supervisor Leggett through some of this information yesterday that we believe is accessible to some of the recent developments that Slick has done. The fourth area is near the Horicon area. It's an area near Sherman Lake Road. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 homes in this general area. I don't know how accessible all of them may be, but it's certainly a big chunk of unaddressed territory. And the last one is a corridor that on the way from Thurman towards Baker's Mill, there is a corridor near Little Pond off of Route 57, where there's a number of maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 homes. Together, if we were to address these 5 areas, it would be more than 450 of the 600 homes that are currently on HughesNet. In addition to this, we want to make sure that any of you that have unserved areas that are either we weren't aware of or that ECC missed, that we add that to the list. And we're working as quickly as we can to meet with each one of you to gather that. Would you mind going through one more for me? I want to walk you through the process that we're going through now, because it can feel almost disconcerting in terms of its speed. The federal government released the NTIA grant, which is the first of what I imagine to be a handful of grants that are oriented at solving this broadband gap, in late June. It's coming out of the Commerce Department, which is not the typical place that these come out of. And it's typically, the grant size is less than $30 million per grant. So this is not big, and it's very fast. But we have thrown ourselves at it for a couple of reasons. The first is that we're approaching this regionally, taking our lead from your wonderful results in leadership working in the Inter-County Forum. There are 6 counties currently, the 5 counties that are a part of the Lake Champlain, Lake George Planning Board area, Warren, Washington, Essex, Hamilton, and Clinton. And we've added a 6th, which is Franklin County, to that list. All of them have agreed to work together and have somebody representing the county in our forums, which we now have once a week to try to develop an application. It's very ambitious to try to do something this new and get an application written in literally weeks. As Wayne and all of you are familiar with, it usually takes us by ourselves months to really go through the grant application process. And when you add the complication of people who have not worked together, I think some could very reasonably say, why are you doing it this way? But I'm going to tell you, it's really important. I don't know whether we're going to get this funding, and I'll tell you why we're not going to, why we wouldn't if we don't. The state of New York has impediments in terms of the cost structure to our carriers that would make us maybe not as competitive as we would like. The cost, for instance, of accessing the poles, we've been addressing from a legislative standpoint. The state has a tax associated with using the right-of-ways for siting fiber, which is unprecedented. Together, our costs are typically 40% more than other states. That may make us not competitive in this grant application. And let's imagine that we go through all this work with 6 counties to try to figure this out, and that's what happens. Well, what would we have gotten? The first thing we would have gotten is the fact that all of those counties will have figured out how to work together, and on the much bigger grants that are going to have more zeros attached to them, we will have a process that will allow us to be more nimble and more effective and hopefully more successful. The second part is, if there are state issues that keep us from being competitive, we can point to these as being a reason that we were not able to secure this funding and hopefully get those remediated before the next wave of grants. Therefore, I think it's really, really important that we engage in this process and not allow the possibility that we won't get funded to keep us from pursuing it. What we will likely be putting in as one of the 6 counties is the 5 areas I just showed you on the ECC HughesNet areas, plus any areas that you identified to us that are unserved by the standards of the grant. I think we're going to use right now, until we get detailed costs from the carriers, a fairly surprising figure, $5,000 per address. That's what it's costing now, that we're up past 80%, near 90% in terms of the homes that are addressed. The last 10% are really expensive. Some might say it's not worth it. I leave that up to you, but I will tell you that this is what it's going to cost, especially given New York's cost structure, to address what remains. And as we go through the list, it gets more expensive. When we get to the last 2%, it will be more than $5,000 a house. But given that, to address roughly 500 addresses at that 5K, I believe that that figure will be about $2.5 million worth of grant ask, and a 10% match from the county would be roughly $250,000. On Friday, we made a rushed attempt, probably flawed, and I will fully accept responsibility for that, to throw this into the mix to try to get a resolution that would say we would allow a not to exceed figure of up to $250,000 on the match. It's really hard to figure out what to do here because this grant is due on August 17th. We were given the opportunity to even know it existed on June 26th. That's just not a lot of time in the process that we normally work at. So if any of this was out of the way that you normally work, I fully accept responsibility for that. But I do think we got to figure out a way to get a resolution or at least a letter from the county, if we want to participate in this, that says that we would stand behind a figure of roughly $250,000 to produce a match. Also want to make sure you know that the grant does not require a match. You can submit an application without a match. You will not secure any dollars without a match. And in fact, we're asking our carriers to also provide a match. So if we're going to ask everyone in good faith, the other counties, the carriers, to provide a match, I think we as Warren County and the leaders of this process perhaps need to do it as well. I do think that the entire thing will come in somewhere between $15 and $20 million. The addresses that the other counties have are a bigger chunk of their population, but all of them are smaller than Warren County. So when we look at the total number that is going to be addressed, it's roughly 6 counties at similar scope, maybe slightly larger in terms of the number of addresses that they would like to see addressed. And the whole thing will come to about $15 or $20 million. That's a lot, I know. And in fact, it's not intended that this is not our coming out party for this study. We're going to actually present this study when it's fully vetted to you and then to the public in great detail. But I did want you to have information that would allow you to feel less confused or maybe with less questions than you might have had only days ago. And we're working as hard as we can. John Wheatley, I know, has reached out to every single supervisor's office in the last week. I know you guys have been here. I've been here 2 days. You've been here more days than me. So we probably haven't been able to close with all of you, but we will, because we need your support. And we also need to make sure that we're fact checking all the data that we have with ECC. One last thing I would tell you is whether it's you that brings your school superintendents in or we do it directly, we would like to engage them as well. They know better than anyone over the past year who was not served and for what reason. And if it's a financial issue, we need to get onto that too and figure out how do we access the funds that are needed in order for people to be able to get the broadband that they require. But if it's a physical access issue, it could be that it's something that has fallen between the cracks that neither you or I know about, and we want to make sure we capture that as well. There's more for me to talk about, but before we go off topic from broadband, I want to know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? Do we want to move a resolution asking for a letter of support? Supervisor Leggett?
Yeah, thanks, Chairwoman Hogan. This has been the most comprehensive and open opportunity I think we have as a county and as a region to address a problem we've all recognized and have put a high priority status on. And 10%, when you look at it, it's a $250,000 match for 500 homes. Yeah, that's it's not going to get much better than that. Also, I would agree with Mr. Siplon's assessment that there will be more of these coming along. Down at the National Association of Counties annual conference last week between Vice President Harris and Speaker Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and Buttigieg and all of them talking about plans for the nation. Broadband is number one. It's right up there, probably even above roads and bridges at this point in time, because there's so many rural areas like ours that need the help. So it's worth getting in line.
Is that a motion?
I move it to the floor.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Stroud, thank you. Discussion?
Approved from here, where does it go?
I believe what we'd have to do is ask the chairwoman to supply a letter and hope that the board will ratify that decision at the full board meeting in August. Since we have, oh, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to do just that. We can draft a letter that will go in the application packet. And we, as Jim mentioned before, EDC is in the process of speaking with every supervisor. And we would make sure that if we would want every individual supervisor to be comfortable with this direction. And I think that as a result of those phone calls, and we can pitch in and help out with that if you need the help. We'll keep a list of anybody that's not comfortable with this, with the idea that once we get to the board meeting where it's going to be a ratification, that letter will have already been sent in, but we'll have some assurance that at that August 20th board meeting, it's going to pass unanimously.
Chairwoman Seaver first.
Thank you. Chairwoman Hogan, Ryan, would this have to then go to finance to determine a source of money for the match, or this would just be like a regular grant application by committee? You know, whenever our departments apply for grants, they go through the committee approval process.
If the grant's awarded and we have an actual match that's identified that we need to supply, then that would be the point in time where we would take action, a formal action that is,
Okay.
To appropriate that money.
Okay.
But I do think that it makes sense for us to think about that possibility that we are having to come up with that source and to have it in our heads what that source is likely going to be.
Is it worth then, I'm sorry if I may,
Go ahead.
is it worth then, if it moves out of this committee, we start drafting the letter, we make sure that we have the contact all the supervisors and have it move over to finance, just it being more eyes on it, or just to the full board?
I defer to this committee on whether they want to make that referral or take the, I'm comfortable either way because I have confidence in the process that we're going to talk to each supervisor and make sure that nobody has any serious issues with it.
Supervisor Leggett?
Thank you. So in the letter of support, we would also pledge that $250,000. That's what's being looked for. It is good to have a source for that. And I would put out at this point in time, in the scope of all things that we use occupancy tax, no, just kidding, that we use, that we take it out of fund balance. That's a capital improvement.
Thank you. What's the procedure for holding a vote until later in the meeting? Because I just lost my quorum. All right. Well, then we'll go ahead and do this so you can. I'll call, is there any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Supervisor Garrity, you with us?
Yep.
Any nays? All right.
So by extension, this should be added to the capital improvement program?
Yes.
That what I'm hearing? Okay.
Thank
Sarah added that.
Thank you. All right, Jim,
Well,
housing.
I wanted to mention one other thing. It will be a not to exceed figure. We're working on the very specific costs by carrier right now with each of the carriers. We've met with 2 out of the 3 that we think we're going to get significant bids with. I think within a week's time, we will have a better estimate than that, but it won't be larger than that. It could potentially be slightly less, but our goal would be to optimize around this figure because of what we believe remains to be done. We have not disclosed, by the way, the $5,000 per passing to them. So it's very important that, we be discreet about that. You needed to know how this was figured. One last thing I want to tell you is, I don't know if you know, but Warren County is kind of a rock star in the country around broadband. So, and that's mostly thanks to the leadership that I think you've shown over a number of years, and also the work that Ryan's been doing in the committee. But at the recent NACO, report they put out on this, one of the 9 case studies they show nationwide about the best practices to follow comes from Warren County. It's the process of updating the maps, developing a regional strategy, and then working with others to try to figure out how to finish the job. that you've been on the map for a while. There's been a lot of national media coverage over the past year as well. We've had a number of local stations. We've had a number of local radio, including NPR. I came into work earlier this spring one day and my phone was all blowing up. And I started taking calls from all over the country. They said, I heard you this morning on NPR. So North Country Public Radio did a story on the work that we were doing in Thurman. It was broadcast throughout the country, and people from Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Florida, Texas, everybody heard it. And what they heard was that we had a strategy and we were working together, not only amongst communities in our own county to address this, but now with other counties. That's now become part of the texture of who we are. Sometimes I think it would be good to remember that there's a lot of really amazing stuff that comes out of this county. I'm certainly grateful for it. Well, I want to move on now quickly.
There's our second feel-good moment. Thanks, Jim.
You bet.
Housing now?
What's that?
Housing?
Yes, we're going to race to housing. I started getting a lot of questions saying, I understand you got a housing work group. Why am I not on it? And also, why are you doing that? And I think those are fair questions. Why are we having a housing work group? Because earlier, if you remember the Roost study that we did in conjunction with Roost that talked about people and their proclivity to relocate here. And I thought about that while Dan Kelleher was talking about the work they're doing to develop housing in the park. It was clearly identified that there is an unprecedented wave of migration occurring here. If you remember, more than 15% of those nearly 10,000 respondents said they were in the process of moving to the Adirondacks. Another 10% said they were waiting to see whether or not their job would stay remote, and if so, they were going to move to the Adirondacks. That's a total of nearly 2,500 people who expressed that they're moving. So even though it's pretty remarkable what Dan showed you today in the park is less than 1,500 total housing units. If all of that were to come into being today, it would still not meet the need that has been already identified in a survey, not as an example, not as a sample, but just the raw numbers of people who said they're coming. We don't have enough houses between us and the park. That's why we're engaged in this, because it's now becoming a throttle on our ability to grow the economy here. They said they need two things. They need a house and they need a broadband connection. And if they have those things, they will consider moving here. We're obviously been addressing the broadband side. We now got to address the housing side. We are not looking to supplant any work that others are doing here. There's amazing work that's been going on around affordable housing and other aspects of housing in our county and other places. But it is hard to ascertain at any one moment in time how many houses of what type do we have and where? What's happening to the price? How much demand is there? Are there things we should be doing from a public policy standpoint that would make the situation better? Is what we're doing consistent with our own plan? If we do what we continue to do, what is our economy going to look like 10 years from now? How many kids are going to be in school? Look, I mean no disrespect when I say this, but it's important to note what happens when you don't aggressively get in front of those questions. There were less than 20 kids that graduated from Lake Placid High School this year. The housing market is on fire there. That's not a sustainable economy. People cannot afford to work in the city that they once lived in, and that there are jobs, but they can't have a house. That is not the story of a successful Warren County 10 years from now. But if we don't want a similar outcome here, we have to go get in the messiness of understanding the data and then talking to each other about what to do. So our part of this is to facilitate that discussion with the best data we can possibly provide and bring you as the rulers and leaders and planners of this community, the information that will allow you to be informed as you work through those. And it's also our responsibility to bring that to the public. We need to raise the acumen of the entire community. This is a shared problem, a good problem. People want to come here. What do we want to do about it? So just to give you a sense, I threw a couple of the charts in of the things that we're working on with a very small group of people as we try to collect this data. For about another month, we're going to continue deep in this data collection effort. We're going to have our first coming out around the middle of August. There's a national economist from the National Association of Realtors who has agreed to provide a sense of how our data compares to nationwide data and what are some of the things that we should be considering. That is the opportunity for us to engage you and another swath of the people who are involved in all aspects of the housing economy, the planners, the planning board members, the zoning board members, the developers, the bankers, all of the people who are sitting around trying to figure out exactly what's happening. We want to share as much data as we possibly can, as quickly as we can. We'll also expand the group at that point. It will make sense to. It doesn't make sense for us to bring a bunch of bankers and planners into the part where we're trying to figure out, well, what data do we have to share? But we're only a few weeks from the place where we will start to expand to include those people. And also, we're going to reinitiate the planning conference that the EDC has historically held. And I think there's going to be unprecedented interest in it this year. There's people everywhere are thirsting for this information. How many houses do we have? Where are they? What do we need? How do we get more of what we need? Those are questions that I think is really important that we bring resources to help answer. What we do is completely up to us, but we will certainly bring you as much information as we can. All right. I'll let you ask me any questions you have about that one-on-ones in the interest of time, but I did want to make sure that we covered the business activities that have been going on since the last time I saw you. I think the last time I saw you was mid-May, although I feel like I've seen many of you since then. There's roughly 99 active economic inquiries in the county today, slightly up from the last number. I think the last number I gave you was 92. They continue to be evenly broken out between the city, the town of Queensbury, and the greater county. But there are several that are getting larger and perhaps more likely than the last time I came to see you. I've pointed out a handful. There is a manufacturer that is looking to relocate from another part of New York, not unlike Hacker Boat, moving from one part of New York to another to facilitate their growth, and they want to come to Warren County. They're not looking at any other place. This is simply up to us to figure out how to provide a compelling economic case for them to be able to do what they already have indicated an interest in doing. That's very encouraging. There's a very large out-of-state manufacturer that is in the midst of a site selection exercise, and we are a finalist in that process. I am still not at liberty to provide any specifics about it, but that process is going to take its next milestone by the end of the month. By the next time I see you, I'll be able to tell you all about it if we're still in the game. And it's a big, important one if we're able to secure it. And then this is also a fascinating one. There is a clean tech company or entity that is interested in a long-term strategy of partnering with Warren County. They want to partner with Warren County in some very innovative ways. They've talked to me about things like not only the use of solar and clean energy, but the use of carbon capture. And the idea of, if that investment is made in a carbon capture capability, would there be other companies that would be interested in using carbon as an ingredient in our local economy? Would we be willing to stand behind a shared development effort to try to attract those kind of companies? When you saw Dan Kelleher's presentation of the kind of industry that works in the park, and remember that more than 90% of our surface area is behind that blue line. This is the kind of industry that works in those kind of constraints. I love the fact that they came to us. We didn't have to hunt them out. I don't know whether they're going to materialize the way I hope, but the idea that they showed up and they're deep in conversations about how would this work and is this the right place to do it? Well, we're one of probably only one or two places that they're talking to about that. That's very promising to me. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that we're at that 1 year anniversary of the loss of Ed. And one of the things that was left undone, or at least not maybe completely buttoned up from last fall, was the idea of building an ongoing legacy to the contributions that Ed made to the community. There was an attempt to fund a scholarship, and I think it was difficult mechanically to do. And I think money was raised, but there was never a formal scholarship in Ed's name that was truly identified and would be an enduring legacy. So what we've agreed to do at the EDC, in conjunction with the family, because we've met with Ed's family a number of times over the spring, is to kind of rejuvenate that effort. We are going to take over the effort, and we're going to turn it away from a scholarship into funding internships in the local economy in Ed's name. And we're looking to develop an ongoing annuity stream that will fund this. The very first event that we're proposing is a Frisbee golf tournament in the new Crandall Park Frisbee Golf Course. That's a fully inclusive event that almost anybody can participate in. We've already secured the facility for September. We're working with the city to work out the details. But in mid-September, there will be an event in Ed's name. You don't have to play in order to contribute, but I would think that all of us would want to figure out how we could be a part of carrying on Ed's legacy. And it's hard for us to imagine a more fitting thing that would make him proud than to find young people and find ways to involve them in our businesses right here at home, to help organizations that might not otherwise be able to fund an internship like that, to create a win-win for both that individual and the company and our local economy. So I hope you'll join with us. We'll certainly share more details as we develop them. That's all I had, but I did tell you it was going to be more than 15 minutes.
Thank you, Jim. And then 3 feel-good moments. Just saying, everybody, 3. Before we adjourn, we have one quick piece of business we need to take care of that is not really related to economic growth and development. Supervisor Driscoll has asked that we bring forward a suggestion for a resolution that would solve a problem we're having with the campership program through Cornell Cooperative Extension. And to outline the issue, John Bowe has joined us. John?
Good morning or afternoon. How is everybody?
Definitely afternoon. Thank you for hanging in there.
No problem. So we have successfully located 65 students to go to camp. We had them booked at Sky Farm Camp. And as many of you know, finding employees this year has been a challenge for many, many businesses. And Sky Farm Camp, unfortunately, has been unable to retain enough counselors and a registered nurse to stay open. So they've already provided 28 campers the opportunity to go. They've gone, they've returned successfully and happily, and we have an additional 34 that were booked to go. Unfortunately, with the closure of Sky Farm Camp, we are trying to find alternatives that are both affordable and approved by the county. We have looked into every other 4-H camp. We've also looked into several local camps, but most of the local camps are 400% more tuition per camper than Sky Farm Camp. The only camps that we can find that have competitive rates are 4-H camps, and one is located in Franklin County, one is located in Cortland County, and one is located in Delaware County. As you know, we don't have a camp anymore. It's been gone about 10 or 15 years now. So we are in a quandary as to, can we spend money to send youth outside the county to another camp? And can we provide transportation using some of those funds? As you know, most of these youth are from low-income homes that are challenged financially and possibly in other social means. So we are exploring, can we bus a group to these camps, and would it be approved by the county before we go any farther? We need that information.
So to be clear, John, you would still be within the 25,000 that we've allocated to the program.
Yes. Fortunately for us, Sky Farm Camp had a couple of major donors who have essentially scholarshiped about 50% of the kids that we had selected for attending. So that has allowed us to stretch our dollars. And because they are still willing to scholarship the kids who went, or at least 50% of the kids who went in the first round, we'll be able to stretch those dollars into the second round, possibly for transportation if needed. So that's how we're looking at this. So no, we would not be asking for any additional funds. It would all be within the 25,000 and the private donations that have been made to the program.
As far as we're concerned, This is all under Resolution 448 of 2020, where the $25,000 was allocated. And in that resolution, it specifically states that it's to send these kids to Sky Farm. It does not dictate that, we can't transport them. It does not dictate that they have to be within Warren County. So what we need to do from our perspective is amend Resolution 448 of 2020 to simply remove Sky Farm as the identifying recipient. Ryan, go ahead.
I would just first ask whether the contract that we have in place with Sky Farm already allows this, because the resolution is going to be authorizing, I believe, the contract with Sky Farm that the county has.
We don't have the resolution with Sky Farm. CCE does, right, John? Right. We don't have the contract with Sky Farm. Ours is with Cornell Cooperative Extension.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I misspoke. I believe going off the cuff without having reviewed any of this, I'm thinking that our resolution authorizes a contract for this fund, and we would, if the contract will already allow for this to happen, then we may not need to change the resolution.
It specifically says Sky Farm. We just need to take that out of there. I did ask Robert.
You did.
Hang on one sec.
So we need to look at the contract.
Yes, if the contract does specifically say Sky Farm, we'd have to take it out. I haven't seen that contract yet to know exactly what it does say, but
It does say Sky Farm.
it does?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We talked about that earlier. So, okay, are we okay with our path here? We just need to remove Sky Farm because the contract doesn't say anything about going outside of Warren County. It doesn't say anything about.
So the resolution that I think Mr. Stroud would like to bring forward is to amend resolution and contract.
Striking Sky Farm and put in the more generic camp or camps, whatever may apply. This is what I understand there's some of this desire.
Thank you. Is there
I
a second?
second that.
Yeah. You second that? Any further discussion? Okay. So apparently, since the kids are going to be going to camp before we have our next board meeting, we're also going to have to move this forward. Again, hoping to ratify, to ratify,
Sorry, I didn't mean to
execution of
mental.
this contract after the fact. Are we all comfortable with that? Yeah.
I am comfortable with that so long as it's the will of the committee and again, the majority of the board. I want to again be very careful with these types of ratifications on behalf of the chair and that it's only done with the support of the majority of the board.
I agree. That's why I'm looking at the committee.
So thank you.
Yeah, I'm
Supervisor Liggett?
comfortable. There is no change in price. This is all for the same purpose. It's just to distribute the campers under the existing program to other camps. And it should be a lesson in writing our resolutions and contracts to not be so specific in certain cases.
Anybody else? You're good? You're comfortable? Okay. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Carried. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your patience, John.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
You too. All right. Is there any privilege of the floor? Yep. Please do, Mr. Bean.
I'll make this very brief. I know we've had a long meeting. I'm here on behalf of the Hospitality Communications Group with my colleague, Catherine Flack-Munsell, a member of the group. I'm Mark Bean. First of all, thank you for your service. We don't say that enough. The Hospitality Communications Group over the last couple of weeks has been very focused on Million Dollar Beach and the other beaches in Lake George. And we put together a little working group that will address two issues. One is, are there continuing technical issues that we need to address with respect to the presence of E. coli from time to time? You'll recall that in May, there was an E. coli reading that closed the beach for a day, Million Dollar Beach for the day, and got widespread publicity. So there is a technical issue that has to be addressed. What's going on here that we don't understand? And second, there's a public communications issue that has to be addressed. With Supervisor Hogan's leadership and support from Supervisor Dickinson and Supervisor Bramer and Supervisor Garrity, Supervisor Stroud, we've all talked about this. We want to put together a little group to focus on these issues and see if we can't help DEC come to some clear answers about this, because we need to solve this problem. It's first of all a public health and environmental issue, and secondly, it's a public communications issue. So we are here to ask for your support on that and to invite DEC to be a part of this process with a letter from Chairwoman Sieber, perhaps a resolution at your August meeting. We want there to be a full participation here, so we, to the extent we can, we resolve these issues for all time. We're working with the town and the village. They've done an enormous amount of work up there. The state's done an enormous amount of work, and yet we continue to have a problem. So we're trying to resolve it by bringing all the interested parties to the table, including the Lake George Association and the local government folks. So if we could get some support from this committee and from the county board, we'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to committee today, both of you. You absolutely have our full support on this issue. To the communications piece of it, I believe we've made some headway in that we now have the DEC agreeing to simultaneously notify the county at the same time that they're notifying the public of any issues, so that we will then be able to utilize the networks we've already established to maybe a little bit more quickly communicate out any problems that are coming our way. As to the meeting with DEC, as you know, I did speak with them this morning. They are very open to meeting with us, and we will be setting that up in the future.
Great. Thank you again for your support.
Thanks for your patience. And I stay for Octax. Is there anything further to come to this committee? And Don, is there any public comment?
Hi, we have no public comment on YouTube.
Thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Leggett? Somebody? Anybody? Chairwoman Sieber? All in favor? Thank you.
Yeah. The only thing it is, that I would say, the key thing that some towns have